During the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union stockpiled a massive number of nuclear weapons. In the mid-1960s, the US had led in pure numbers, with over 31,000 weapons available to be deployed. The Soviet Union overtook it mid-1970s, leading to over 40,000 Russian weapons by 1987. Decades after the Cold War, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and the signing of various non-proliferation agreements, those statistics have dropped to more reasonable levels. But China's ambition to be the next world power has led it to become a late yet important entrant. The growing military power has a few hundred nuclear weapons of its own. That means the US has to contend with not one but two major geopolitical enemies who've been confirmed to have nuclear weapons. So let's delve into how the nuclear arsenals of these three powers compare, the possible projections of a nuclear war between them, as well as what could and should be done to prevent it. We'll start with the United States, which maintains one of the most advanced and diversified nuclear arsenals in the world. According to the Federation of American Scientists, the US has approximately 3,700 warheads in its nuclear stockpile for delivery by aircraft and ballistic missiles. Of these, about 1,770 are deployed, meaning they're ready to launch, with another 1,930 in reserve. Somewhat surprisingly, this makes the US the world's second largest nuclear power in terms of sheer numbers, just behind Russia. The backbone of America's land-based nuclear deterrent is arguably the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile. The US Air Force deploys 400 of these missiles in underground silos across Colorado, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, and Wyoming. Each missile can carry up to 3 nuclear warheads and has a range exceeding 6,000 miles, enough to reach most targets on Earth if launched from the US itself. Notably, this means that the US Air Force can, in theory, deploy 1,200 warheads at a moment's notice. However, each missile is suspected to only have a singular warhead deployed to increase the overall reach and area effectiveness of a potential missile barrage. In November 2025, the US Air Force Global Strike Command also conducted a test launch of an unarmed Minuteman III from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. The missile flew approximately 4,200 miles across the Pacific Ocean before reaching its target at the Ronald Reagan Ballistic Missile Defense Test Site in the Marshall Islands. This test, designated GT-254, was particularly significant because it was launching using the Airborne Launch Control System from a Navy E-6B aircraft. The E-6B is essentially a backup command system designed to ensure the US can launch its nuclear weapons even if ground-based command centers are destroyed in an enemy first strike. General S.L. Davis, commander of the US Air Force Global Strike Command, emphasized the importance of these tests. As we modernize to the Sentinel weapon system, we must continue to maintain the readiness of the existing Minuteman III fleet. But land-based missiles are just one leg of America's nuclear triad. The sea-based leg consists of 14 Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, each capable of carrying 20 Trident II missiles with multiple warheads. These submarines provide the ultimate survivability. They can remain hidden beneath the ocean for months, virtually undetectable, ready to launch a devastating counterattack even if America's land-based forces are destroyed. Then there's the air-based leg. This had previously included B-52 Stratofortress and B-2 Spirit stealth bombers capable of delivering nuclear gravity bombs and cruise missiles. The US has also developed the B-21 Raider, a next-generation stealth bomber that will be able to penetrate the most advanced air defense systems in the world. Notably, while there are only 19 B-2 bombers deployed by the US, some estimates suggest that the US forces will procure possibly 100 B-21s in the initial few years and scale up to around 200 units. This would allow the US Air Force to combine nuclear and non-nuclear weapons and create devastating bombing squadrons if the need arises. The presence of multiple systems also means that the US is technically always trying to modernize them. The original Minuteman III has been in service since 1970 and is intended to be replaced with the newer Sentinel missile starting in 2029. By some projections, the new missile is supposed to be modular and more cost-effective in the long run, which should ideally help the military reduce maintenance costs and make the arsenal more future-proof. The US is also developing tactical nuclear options like the Sea Launched Cruise Missile Nuclear, or SLCMN, designed to provide more flexible response options. Additionally, President Donald Trump signed an executive order in early 2025 to develop an Iron Dome-style missile defense system for the continental United States. This would mirror the system that Israel currently uses, which is arguably untested against nuclear threats. For comparison, the Iron Dome has been steadily battered by Iran's long-range missile and drone strikes since the escalation of the Israel-Hamas conflict in late 2023. So far, Israel has been relatively unaffected by missiles and has managed to repel or destroy a vast majority of incoming projectiles. If the US Iron Dome system does get developed, it will need to intercept and disable faster missiles that can detonate mid-air and irradiate vast areas. Some analysts have suggested that any such design will ultimately fail when pitted against real-life scenarios, and that mutually assured destruction or non-proliferation agreements are the safer way to approach nuclear armaments. Now, let's turn to Russia, which possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal and perhaps its most terrifying. It maintains approximately 4,309 nuclear warheads in its stockpile, according to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, with about 1,720 deployed on strategic delivery systems and another 1,500 tactical nuclear weapons of various types. When you include retired warheads that are paradoxically still awaiting dismantlement, Russia's total inventory is somewhere around 5,460 warheads, practically over 50% more numerous than the US. Russia, like the United States, possesses the capability to deploy these warheads through its own established nuclear triad. Russia's land-based ICBM force includes around 333 deployed missiles of various types, the silo-based RS-18 and RS-28 Sarmat, and the road-mobile Topol-M and Yars systems. The road-mobile launchers are particularly concerning because they can be moved throughout Russia's vast territory, making them extremely difficult to target in a first strike. In late October 2025, President Vladimir Putin announced that Russia had successfully tested two of its most exotic nuclear weapons, the Poseidon underwater drone and the Burevestnik cruise missile. The Poseidon, sometimes called a doomsday machine, is a nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed torpedo that can travel thousands of miles underwater before detonating near an enemy coastline. According to some estimates, detonating a Poseidon off the US East Coast could shower nearby cities with radioactive shrapnel and debris, rendering them practically uninhabitable. Putin claimed the test marked the first time the weapon's nuclear power unit was successfully started after launch from a submarine. The Burevestnik, or Skyfall, is another cruise missile that can theoretically fly for hours or even days before striking its target. This is thanks to the missile having an active nuclear reactor to propel it, allowing it to circle the Earth if needed and drop down on the target. Russian Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov claimed the missile traveled 8,700 kilometers and stayed aloft for 15 hours during its test. Norway's intelligence service confirmed the test took place at Novaya Zemlya and flew significantly longer than before. The missile has been in development since 2016, and the 9-year iteration cycle seems to have brought it to operational capacity. These two missiles, plus a slew of smaller designs, are directly meant to threaten the US with sheer numbers supremacy. Russia's plan seems to hinge on launching as many missiles as possible from multiple angles, hoping to overwhelm the enemy's detection and defense systems. But what makes Russia's nuclear arsenal most concerning is how the Russian leadership has been willing to fall back on threatening to use the weapons for minor spats. Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, Russian officials have issued nuclear threats on an almost monthly basis. To date, there have been more than 50 documented instances of such nuclear rhetoric by Russian leaders. The threats began before the first tank crossed the border. On the day of the invasion, Putin warned that anyone who tried to interfere would face consequences you have never seen in your history. 3 days later, he ordered Russia's nuclear forces to special combat readiness, which is a heightened state of alert. In September 2022, as Ukrainian forces launched successful counter-offensives, Putin declared that Russia would use all the means at our disposal to defend its territory, which was widely interpreted as a nuclear threat and forced NATO to reconsider sending more modern weapons to Ukraine. Former President Dmitry Medvedev made even more explicit threats, suggesting Russia could use nuclear weapons against Ukraine. By June 2023, Russia had confirmed that it was deploying nuclear weapons to Belarus, marking the first time Russia had stationed nuclear weapons outside its territory since the Soviet collapse. And in November 2024, Putin approved an updated nuclear doctrine that many experts believe lowers the threshold for nuclear use, allowing Russia to use nuclear weapons in response to conventional attacks by a non-nuclear state if it's supported by a nuclear power. Of course, Russia has also been severely damaged by the war in Ukraine. Its aerial leg of the nuclear triad was culled by the Operation Spiderweb in 2025. By smuggling drones across the border and into the Belaya and Olenia air bases, which were hundreds of miles away from the Russia-Ukraine border, Ukraine has directly attacked Russia's nuclear bombers. By some estimates, roughly 20% of the fleet has been damaged by the attack. While the actual scale of destruction has been impossible to verify, and Russia will likely hide specifics for years to come, this attack could be argued to be one of the most successful direct attempts at dismantling another country's nuclear capabilities. Russia's losses have caused its actions in the war to become increasingly erratic and potentially unpredictable. Considering the size of its arsenal, Russia could comfortably target most large cities in NATO member nations and create a devastating first strike. And then there's China, which is undergoing the fastest nuclear buildup in modern history. According to the Pentagon's December 2024 report to Congress, China's nuclear arsenal has surpassed 600 operational warheads as of mid-2024. To put this in perspective, as recently as 2020, the Pentagon believed China had around 200 warheads. In just 4 years, China has tripled its nuclear arsenal. And the expansion isn't slowing down. The Pentagon projected that China will have over 1,000 operational nuclear warheads by 2030 and will continue growing its force through at least 2035. Some estimates suggest China could field as many as 1,500 warheads by 2035. China is producing new warheads at a rate of approximately 100 per year. Regarding ICBMs, China has deployed around 462 missiles, more than Russia's 333. These include the DF-31, DF-41, and the massive DF-5, which can carry multiple independently targetable warheads. All of these ICBMs are theoretically capable of reaching the continental US if launched from mainland China. In September 2024, China test-fired an ICBM for the first time in over 4 decades. The DF-31AG missile carried a dummy warhead into international waters in the South Pacific. While China called it a legitimate and routine arrangement, the test sent a clear signal about China's growing capabilities. China has also unveiled the new DF-61 ICBM, which can carry multiple warheads and has a range exceeding 7,500 miles, putting every major American city within reach. But China is also developing entirely new ways to deliver the warheads beyond using just ICBMs. Take China's July 2021 test of what appears to be a fractional orbital bombardment system, or FOBS. This weapon flies into Earth's orbit, circles the globe, then descends towards its target at speeds 5 times faster than sound. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles that follow predictable arcs, this weapon can maneuver during flight, making it virtually impossible to intercept. According to the Defense Intelligence Agency, China could have up to 60 of these orbital missiles ready to deploy by 2035. At sea, China is also upgrading its Type 094 ballistic missile submarines with new missiles that have a range of nearly 9,000 miles, allowing Chinese submarines to strike the United States from protected waters near China's coast. In September 2025, China publicly displayed all 3 legs of its nuclear triad for the first time at its Victory Day parade, including the new Jinglei-1 air-launched ballistic missile carried by H-6N bombers. Perhaps most concerning is evidence that China's nuclear doctrine is evolving. For decades, China maintained a minimum deterrence posture and a strict no-first-use policy, keeping just enough weapons to ensure it could retaliate if attacked. But the Pentagon's 2024 report suggested China is abandoning this approach. Instead of merely ensuring it can inflict limited damage in retaliation, China now seeks the ability to inflict far greater levels of overwhelming damage to an adversary in a nuclear exchange, as well as engage in multiple rounds of counterstrike. US intelligence assessments suggest China is moving toward a launch-on-warning posture, meaning it will launch its nuclear weapons immediately upon detecting an incoming attack, rather than waiting to absorb the first blow. This is one of the Cold War's most dangerous policies because it increases the risk of accidental nuclear war due to false alarms or miscalculation. So, how do these 3 nuclear powers differ in their approaches to nuclear weapons? The United States has never adopted a no-first-use policy, maintaining the option to use nuclear weapons first in extreme circumstances. Under current policy, the US promises not to use nuclear weapons against most countries, namely those that are party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and in compliance with their obligations. But this negative security assurance doesn't apply to Russia, China, or North Korea. The Trump administration's 2018 Nuclear Posture Review significantly expanded what qualifies as extreme circumstances that might justify nuclear use, including significant non-nuclear attacks against US forces, allies, or critical infrastructure. Russia had a no-first-use policy during the Soviet era, but abandoned it in 1993 due to the weakness of its conventional forces after the Soviet collapse. Russia's current doctrine, stemming from the November 2024 update, allows nuclear use in response to nuclear or WMD attacks, or in response to conventional attacks that threaten the very existence of the state. But Russia has seemingly developed the concept of escalate to de-escalate, using a limited nuclear strike early in a conflict to shock an adversary into backing down. The idea that anyone could believe deploying nuclear weapons would calm things down rather than trigger all-out war is frankly terrifying. China has maintained a formal no-first-use policy since it first developed nuclear weapons in 1964. Unlike the US and Russia, China has traditionally stored its warheads separately from its missiles, making a surprise first strike virtually impossible. But as we've seen, there are signs this is changing. The massive buildup of missiles and warheads, the development of early warning satellites, and the construction of new silo fields all suggest China may be moving toward a launch-on-warning posture. While China has repeatedly affirmed its no-first-use commitment, including at a Chinese Foreign Ministry press conference in late 2024, when spokesperson Mao Ning stated China follows a policy of no first use of nuclear weapons and a nuclear strategy that focuses on self-defense, some analysts question whether this policy would hold in a conflict that threatened the survival of the Chinese Communist Party. Defense Intelligence Agency reports suggest China's strategy probably includes consideration of a nuclear strike in response to a non-nuclear attack threatening the viability of China's nuclear forces. The DIA added that Beijing probably would also consider using its nuclear force if a conventional military defeat in Taiwan gravely threatened the regime's survival. Now, let's talk about what makes nuclear war between major powers fundamentally different from any conflict in history, including Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When the United States dropped atomic bombs on Japan in 1945, they achieved exactly what they were designed to do: shock the enemy into surrender. Japan could not retaliate with nuclear weapons. The use of 2 bombs ended the war. But a nuclear exchange between the US, Russia, or China would be completely different. All 3 nations possess survivable second strike capabilities. They have submarines that can remain hidden for months, mobile launchers that can be moved constantly, and command systems designed to ensure retaliation even if leadership is eliminated. This creates a terrifying incentive structure. If any of these nations believed a nuclear attack was imminent, or that it was about to lose a conventional war so badly that its existence was threatened, its leadership would face enormous pressure to launch first and launch everything. Otherwise, simply waiting means your weapons might be destroyed before you can use them. This is the fundamental instability that launch on warning posture create. If Russia or China believes the US might use overwhelming force, regardless of the form it takes, their first instinct would be to try to disable America's defensive and retaliatory systems before they can respond. That means launching hundreds or thousands of warheads simultaneously. And the US, detecting those launches, would have perhaps 6 to 30 minutes to decide whether to launch its own weapons before they're destroyed in their silos. The result wouldn't be 1 or 2 bombs ending a war. It would be over 3,000 warheads detonating across the northern hemisphere in less than an hour. Major cities would be vaporized, military installations would be craters, electromagnetic pulses would destroy electronic systems across continents. And that's just the first hour. The fires from hundreds of detonations would inject an estimated between 5 and 150 million tons of smoke and soot into the stratosphere. This black carbon would absorb sunlight, causing global temperatures to drop by as much as 14 degrees Celsius over the following 2 years. Unlike Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there would be no victor, only billions of people dead, and the entire world order would collapse. So, who has the deadliest nukes? Russia has the most warheads and has shown the most willingness to threaten their use. The United States has the most sophisticated delivery systems and the most experienced nuclear force. China is expanding faster than anyone expected and is developing some of the most advanced new weapons. But the truth is, once you have enough nuclear weapons to destroy civilization, and all 3 nations crossed that threshold long ago, comparisons become almost meaningless. It's like asking which is deadlier, a tsunami or a typhoon, when both can kill everyone. What really matters is whether these weapons are ever used, and the only way to ensure they aren't is through continued diplomacy, arms control agreements, and non-proliferation efforts. Russia suspended its participation in the New START Treaty in February 2023, the last major arms control agreement between Washington and Moscow. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty was abandoned in 2019. The nuclear testing moratorium that is held since 1992 is under increasing strain. At the same time, all 3 nations are modernizing their arsenals. Conversely, President Trump suggested he might be working on a denuclearization plan with Russia and China. The Chinese Foreign Ministry seems to have echoed the sentiment in its own statements on upholding the existing policies. But whether these statements lead to actual progress remains to be seen. The weapons exist, the delivery systems are operational, the command structures are in place. All that prevents nuclear catastrophe is the continued rationality of a handful of world leaders and the absence of a single catastrophic miscalculation. And the only way to stop this from happening is for the world's nuclear powers to agree, truly agree, that these weapons must never be used, and to build the diplomatic architecture to ensure that agreement holds even in times of crisis. Thanks for watching. Now, if you want to know how exactly a potential nuclear war might turn out, check out our detailed analysis and we'll see you next time on The Military Show.